guys hear me now? Okay, I'm going to give you guys a job. You have to remind me to tell you about these. Okay? I'm very lost. I do a lot of speaking and presentations, and I always have a PowerPoint and a big food display. So if you see me going like this, it's because I'm looking for my Diet Coke can or my, I have like all these, I saw the diet, little twinge about the Diet Coke. I really, this is a funny thing because I was really thinking about you guys. Normally when I'm speaking, I also have like an hour to 2 hours, to talk, and to 20 minutes. Some people think, I'd much rather do 20 minutes than 2 hours. I'd much rather do 2 days than 20 minutes, especially for this particular topic, because the subject of food, especially in this country, in some ways, the food thing is real simple, eat real food, maybe, in some ways it's very simple. But in other ways, it's become very complex and complicated. So I was thinking about you guys and what's the most important thing that I can tell you that you can take home today. And the most important thing is that food is powerful. In fact, I am going to go out on a limb and say that food is the most important topic that's being talked about here today. I really believe that. And the reason why is because we're ingesting food, all of us, every day, all day. And so it affects every aspect of our lives, every day, all day, and everybody that we're interacting with, because it's affecting them as well. And it's funny because I went around, Leslie said in our speaker call, getting ready for this, she said, just speak from your heart. And I'm used to having like PowerPoints with all kinds, lists of different symptoms and gluten grains versus non-gluten grains and, all these kinds of things. And she said, speak from your heart. And so I was, I can speak from my heart, but sometimes coupling that with the nuances of food allergies, it gets a little bit tricky. So I was going around and I was asking people if you were going to come to my talk, what's the number one thing that you would want me to talk about? Well, as you can imagine, I got 10, very different answers, and it sort of, got my mind thinking. And one person asked about cravings, another person asked about fibroids, somebody else asked about arthritis and these different issues that they have going on. And so what I want to tell you is it doesn't matter what it is, there isn't any condition in the body that can't be improved by improving the way that you eat. I don't care what it is. There isn't any condition in the body that can't be improved by improving your diet and the way that you eat. And I will give you some examples of that. Because I think stories really, the proof is in the pudding, as I always say. Organic, raw pudding, of course. And so I wanted to tell you some stories. So just a couple examples. I had a woman that was in a business networking group with me several years ago, and we started working together. And whenever somebody works with me, I have them do a 5-day food diary. I have them write down everything they put in their mouth for 5 days, all day. And they also tell me symptoms that they're having and the top priority things that they want to work on. So we started working together. And the number one thing that she came to me for, which is the number one thing that most people go to a nutritional consultant for, is weight, right? She said, well, I want to lose 20 pounds. But she also had given me all her symptoms and everything that was going on. I said, okay, great. And I said, anything else? She said, no, that's it. I don't have, that's the only thing I really want to work on. And I said, well, I notice, on your intake form that you have arthritis and you're having some issues there and you're on these different medications for arthritis. And she said, oh yeah, that's true. And I said, well, isn't that something you want to work on? And she said, well, that's genetic. There's nothing you can do about that. I said, oh, really? I said, well, if there was something that you could do about that, would you like to do that? She said, well, I don't know, it's genetic. My mother had really bad arthritis. I just really don't see the point. I said, well, I bet you your mother's diet looked very much the same as your diet as well. She said, yeah, that's true. Anyway, what ended up happening was I finally convinced her that there were some things that she could do that just might help with her arthritis. She was on about 4 or 5 different medications, and at one point she confided in me. She was in her mid-40s at the time, and she confided in me that she would wake up every morning and her fingers were so gnarled up and she couldn't raise her arms up. It took her about 2 hours before she could get her hands to open up. And so she told me this in confidence because we were in a group together. I have client confidentiality, and she didn't want people to know this because it's something she felt very, I don't want to say ashamed. It probably wasn't to that degree, but she was self-conscious about it. So her husband would have to get the kids ready for breakfast and get them ready for school, and he would have to dress her in the morning because she couldn't, and she's in her mid-40s, she couldn't undo her hands. She said, the funny thing, the funny thing is, my mother didn't have arthritis to that degree until she was in her 80s. I said, very interesting. Long story short, I finally convinced her to make some changes, and in about 4 to 6 weeks, she was getting up in the morning, and right away, she'd get up in the morning, could open up her hands, was getting dressed, and felt much better, got off of 3 of her medications. And her primary issue, which is, just so you know, arthritis is considered the junk food disease if you talk to natural healthcare practitioners. So generally speaking, people that have arthritis have a very arthritic or have a very acidic condition in the body, and they're usually eating lots of sugar, and they're also usually eating a lot of common food allergens. So for her in particular, and the common food allergens can affect people differently. So for her biggest things were dairy products and sugar. Okay. Another example is I had another woman that came to a class that I gave, and same thing. I went around the room and I said, everybody had to say why they were there. And once again, she said, I want to lose weight. I said, okay, great. And I kind of get bored with the weight thing. And it's one of those funny things where everyone associates food with weight, but they don't associate it with all these other issues that people have going on. So she said, yeah, well, I came, I want to lose some weight and everything. I said, okay, great. I said, well, what else do you have going on? Anything else you want to work on? And she said, she goes, well, yeah, I have this thing going on, but I'm sure there's nothing you can do about it. I'm like, oh, I love to hear that. I said, well, try me. She said, well, I have this thing where every morning I wake up and I cough incessantly for about 2 hours. And 2 to 3 hours, and it's really affecting every aspect of my life. She said, because when I go to work, I'm supposed to be on the phone, but I can't be on the phone. Somebody has to take over for me because I'm coughing. So when I hear cough and congestion, the first thing I think of is dairy. That was the first thing I thought of. So rather than saying, oh, do you drink milk or, consume dairy products, because I thought, I have to back up a second. She had told me that she'd been to all these different healthcare practitioners. She'd gone through all these allergy tests. She'd gone to the acupuncturist, the chiropractor, all these natural healthcare people. And so I just figured somebody would have brought that up with her before about dairy, right? And but no, in fact, she was drinking milk every morning, and then she would have all this coughing. But the first thing that I asked her about was orange juice, because orange juice is another one that a lot of people don't know. Oranges are a common food allergen, and for many people, they're actually mucus producing. So oranges are actually one of the worst things you can have when you have a cold or any kind of cough. Because first of all, when you juice the oranges, you're taking out all the fiber, so it's pretty much straight up sugar, which is going to lower your immune function. And if you are particularly sensitive to oranges. It's a common food allergen, and it'll actually produce mucus. So anyway, this woman says, she said, I drink milk every morning. I said, well, that's your problem right there. And she said, no, how can that be? I've been to all the top allergists. I've been to all these people. Nobody's come up with this. And this was years ago, and I was teaching a class at like your local YMCA for $20 kind of thing. And she just didn't believe me. And I said, listen, I am so confident that if you quit drinking milk, that within a matter of days, if not the next day, you're going to stop coughing. And I said, I'm so sure that I'm going to, I'll bet you $100. You know, sometimes you got to do whatever it takes, right? So she kind of like, that's, you know, she's pretty confident about that. So sure enough, the next week she came in, and right when she walked in the room, I knew she'd stopped drinking the milk. And you want to know how I knew? She had a $100 bill in her hand. Actually, I never collected on that debt. No, actually, what happened was I could see from her face, and the bags under her eyes were gone, which is an indication of food allergies. And you'll see a lot of young children, especially. Many people believe that they should be giving their kids lots of milk. And you see these young children, they've got really puffy eyes and they're cranky and they've got, mucus coming out of their noses because they're allergic to the dairy products and the milk that they're being given. So anyway, and I could tell by her face, the tone of her skin. And she came walking in, and I right when I looked at her, I said, you quit drinking milk this week, didn't you? She said, yes, I did. I said, your cough went away, didn't it? She said, yes, it did. And then when we went around to share with the class, she said to me, you know, everybody shared, and she said, yep, I went off the milk. Kelly was right. And she said within 2 days, the cough was completely gone. She said, completely gone. And then she got tears in her eyes. She said, I've spent the last 3 years dealing with this issue. I have spent thousands and thousands of dollars out of pocket to try to find a solution for this. She said, I can't believe that it was this simple and nobody told me before. Okay? So that's the power of food. I could literally stand up here and tell you stories all day, but they only gave me 20 minutes, so we'll just do 20 minutes worth of stories. So another story, just to give you an example. You know, a lot of us are at the menopausal years, and many women start getting all these different menopausal symptoms, which is interesting because in some cultures they don't, I heard in Japan they didn't even, or at least previously, they didn't even have a word for menopause or hot flash or night sweats because it just doesn't happen. So I had a woman who emailed me once, and she said, you know, I guess somebody actually gave her a copy of my first book, If It's Not Food, Don't Eat It, and she had read it. And she said, you know, I was having these really bad night sweats, and, you know, looking at all these different things, going on hormone replacement and all this stuff, thinking about this, and it was getting really bad. And she said, somebody gave me a copy of your book, and I read it, and I started thinking, I wonder if it's those potato chips that I eat every night before I go to bed that come in the red can, you know. And she said, I wonder if it could have anything to do with that. So she quit eating the potato chips that come in the red can, which have MSG, by the way, one of their primary ingredients in it. And guess what happened? Within a very short, like a couple nights, no more night sweats. Okay? So there isn't any condition. I don't care what it is. Now, is that going to happen for everybody? You don't know. Sometimes you have to play detective. Now, I got a little spark when I mentioned diet soda. So I have a couple stories for you about diet soda, because that's another really big one. I had a woman one time who had fibromyalgia. She had it so severely that she had to go on disability. She couldn't work anymore. And she started using a walker. She was in her mid-30s. She had young children. And she was actually a she was actually a client of a friend of mine who was working with her with, this other stuff. And she said, I'm not getting anywhere with her. What would you recommend diet-wise? I said, well, I don't know. What is she eating? I mean, that, like the diet is like a huge thing. So the first thing I always do is always look at what are people eating, right? This woman, now, once again, this woman had been to slews of doctors, medical doctors, natural health care practitioners, right? I said, well, what I would do is I'd have her do a 5-day food diary. I want to see exactly what they're doing every day, all day. She was drinking diet soda. She was having 2 to 3 diet sodas a day, okay? So I said, well, I don't know if this is it, but I know the diet soda isn't doing her body any good. So that's the first thing I would do, and that's, whenever you're dealing with diet, you always want to work with, the smallest steps that you can and build from there over time. So anyway, once again, long story short, she goes off the diet soda. She was on a walker, and I actually met this woman within a week. She's off the walker, and she's almost pain-free, okay? Diet soda. I could tell you another story about that with a woman with IBS who was running to the bathroom every day, all day, and had a really hard time working or doing any kind of, family kind of functions. Diet soda. She went off the diet soda, no more IBS. So food is powerful. Sometimes you have to play detective to figure out what foods are causing issues for you, or what foods can help you with whatever you have going on. And so I have a whole system for doing that. And everybody who comes by my booth and gives me your email address, I will give you a free copy of my ebook that I'm getting ready to put out, so you can play detective with yourself and figure these things out, because it can be different things for different people and is often multiple things as well. And sometimes it takes a little detective work. But I'd love to help you with that. Come by and see me. Oh, and here. Yes. So if you want to get the ebook, you fill this out and give it to me. And then I didn't talk about MSG, but MSG is in about 60 to 90% of processed foods out there, and it causes all kinds of symptoms, from headaches to seizures to weight gain, depression, brain fog, on and on and on. And the problem is it comes under about 27 different names, okay? So it's hard to figure out. So I have these little cards. Once again, if you come by and see me, you can have a little MSG card and you can stick it in your wallet, okay? And after a while, you get used to what the names are, but this will help you to become familiar with them initially. So that's my presents for you. It's my stories and my presents.